this wave feels like a tsunami. We hear all this money is going into these funds that take these considerations into factor, and we'll have the slides available for everyone afterwards. That if you'd like to dig into John's presentation, and with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Nick Akins, Chairman, President, and CEO of AEP. Nick is the sixth CEO of the company's more than 100-year history. He began his career in 1982 as electrical engineer. Prior to being elected the president of AEP in 2010, he served as executive vice president. He's also a native of Louisiana, and a former chairman of the board of directors of both the Edison Electric Institute, the Electric Power Research Institute, and several other acronyms. Nick is also the former chair of the Business Roundtable Energy Environment Committee, of which he remains a member, and additionally serves on the board of EEI, Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, the Columbus Partnership, Fifth Third Bancorp, and my favorite, he serves on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, of course. So I'm not sure what songs are on your playlist, Nick, but Born to Run AEP must be somewhere there. And before I welcome Nick to the stage, I also wanted to give a shout out to Sandy Nessing, who's really been instrumental in pulling this presentation together and both been a leader in the sustainability movement for many years. And Sandy, if you could put your hand up so people could get to know you. And I'm personally grateful to have gotten to know you over the last several months, so thank you. So Nick also, and I'll wrap up here, plays in a band called the Power Chords, and he's alleged to end every quarterly earnings call with a reference to a rock song. So with that, I'd like to welcome the CEO and the chief drummer of AEP to the stage. And sorry I don't have my keyboard with me. Nick.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Mark. That was a wonderful introduction. I always hear about the Rock Hall of Fame. I do have a theme of every quarterly meeting that we have, the earnings call, and typically it's a rock song associated with the quarter. So investors started to ask, what's your rock song for the quarter? I had to be really careful with that because I wouldn't tell them beforehand because obviously I'd say something about the quarter. So, but I do want to say thank you for having me here at CECP. It's a very, very important topic for our company, a very important topic for our industry as we look forward to many of the things that are occurring today that are completely transformational. I think I can probably advance these. You all know about that. Okay, so there's no doubt, you know, and I think of a purpose of a company. The purpose of our company obviously is to provide affordable, clean energy to our customers, very resilient. But now we're sort of rethinking that because there's so many changes that are occurring in our industry today, and I just think back a couple of days ago, there was an article about the number of species that would potentially go extinct, over 1 million species that would be extinct. And it's primarily driven because of the consumption around the world. And when we think of our industry, I used to say to our young engineers that came onto the company, you have an opportunity to change the world. And at that point in time, we were working on carbon capture and storage for coal-fired generation. Well, today, you have to think about it a little differently, and it's around optimization and efficiency of the product that we provide. The electrical system itself, the energy provided by it, the electrification of the economy that continues, particularly with electric vehicles, storage, those kinds of aspects that are occurring, are changing the face of our industry moving forward, and it's really an opportunity for our industry to come together to really have a forceful role in terms of saving our planet. Because there's no question, I grew up in Louisiana, as was mentioned, in the 70s. During the 70s, I remember the population of the earth was 3.8 billion because Louisiana's population was 3.8 million. And today it's 6.4 billion. And you think about the consumption of energy associated with that, as the human race becomes greater and greater around the world, we have to be very mindful of the operational efficiencies of how we use our product, how we use that product, but also just from a consumption standpoint to ensure that our role is around optimization and efficiency. And it's around the ability to reduce the environmental footprint of the usage of our product. And as the expansion of the economy occurs, as the expansion of electrification occurs, it's even more important for us to be entirely focused on that. So I'll talk a little bit about the governance aspects of how we deal with ESG-related issues. We've put together a corporate accountability report for the last 13 years. And it's been sort of an ongoing process. We meet with many stakeholders along the way. Many are represented in this room. We do that on a regular basis because we wanted to have that interface to challenge us on what the future look like. And this long-term view is incredibly important because I can get through any quarterly earnings call if there's a firm vision for the company from a long-term standpoint and a firm vision by our investors on what we're trying to achieve in the future. You may have inhalations from quarter to quarter, but at the same time, if there's a vision that really is focused on the future, you'll get hall passes if you have a quarter that's off. And particularly in our industry, it's typically seasonal. You can have ups and downs during a quarterly phase, but generally speaking, as long as you show consistency and quality of earnings and dividend profiles, which we have done for the last over 100 years, we'll continue to do that and ensure that our investors not only have a firm foundation from the financial standpoint, but also a foundation for growth relative to not only ESG-related issues, but also corporate sustainability issues across the board. So our corporate accountability report is very detailed. Our board, our governance committee of the board reviews it in detail and makes recommendations to the board each and every year. We believe our corporate accountability report is one of the best in the industry, and certainly we believe our industry is in very good stead from that perspective as well. Very transparent, very focused. We measure ourselves by it. The metrics you see in our report are the metrics that we live by. But I want to make the point that it's a living, breathing document, because each and every year we're changing it based upon what we see in terms of where technology is going, where the industry is going, and the challenges that we face, particularly relative to carbon emissions and those types of things. We show progress each and every year. And the view forward, the long-term view forward, is very different each and every year as well. Let's see, I want to focus on this slide very quickly. AEP is uniquely positioned at this point because we don't have any large central station generation facilities that we're building. And I really believe that if you're thinking about operational efficiency and in terms of technology and where it's going in the future, we're probably in pretty unique circumstance where we're not having to build a large central station, heavily capital intensive focus on a particular thing that could last, whether 2 years or 15 years. We're really focused on smaller projects, focused on improving the customer experience, but also focused on ensuring that we are able to move in and out of different types of capital allocation scenarios so that we can be responsive and agile in this changing environment. So superior capital allocation, the balance sheet strength are particularly important, but also the compelling portfolio of premium investment opportunities is critical, where we are able to look at each component of what services our customers and ensure that we are educating our customers and also using our customers as a value proposition, because customers are now seen as a resource. They're seen as a resource not only in terms of response to what we're doing from a branding perspective, but also just the fact that we're able to aggregate with big data analytics today, which we weren't able to do before, to really look at the value proposition of efficiencies of aggregation of customers. And that's critically important. Very different from when I started. So we talked a little bit about the global trends that are occurring in the industry. I'll point out a couple of them. One is around the technology costs themselves. We are involved with the only utility in the U.S. that's involved with an international forum that's really a sort of a spark tank of sorts, where we go through thousands of startup companies to look at technologies and see if they can be deployed relative to our grid and relative to our customers. And so we go through that, we filter thousands, we get down to the last 15, which we're hosting that in Columbus this year, and it really is focused on opportunities of looking at these technologies and how they make us think differently from the long-term perspective. And when you think about some of these opportunities we have in front of us, I'll just give you a couple of examples. One is a company called Re-Electrify, which we've focused on battery technologies and the usage of battery technologies and how to maximize the benefit of storage capability across the board with customers. Another is called House. It's a sort of a simple thing, looking at technologies around the customer itself, where we can look at individual devices within a home and see if you have elderly parents that live 1,000 miles away and they don't turn their coffee pot on at 5:30 in the morning, then you get a sort of a first alert type of signal. So there's all kinds of things that we can look at that provide optimization and efficiency, not only in terms of the grid itself, but also in terms of our customer mix. So digitization, data analytics, big data analytics are having a tremendous impact. We have more analysts working at this company than we've ever had, and certainly with cyber and physical security that we certainly are focused on critical infrastructure, those are important aspects of what we do today that didn't even exist a few years ago. And they're absolutely critical to us to be able to look at and determine, can we look at devices within the grid and see that they're about to fail as opposed to waiting till after they fail, for example, to improve the continuity of service to our customers. Can we optimize and drive efficiencies within big box stores and those types of things to ensure that we adjust lighting, for example? We have technology where we adjusted lighting, and you could reduce the lighting by 60% and customers wouldn't even recognize it. Just think about if you aggregated that over multiple establishments and the benefit that you would get from a generation perspective. That's incredible value. So that value proposition occurs across the board. And there's no question that the customers are changing, the dynamics of customers, and I can tell you that by giving customers control, they're certainly focused on reducing their electric bill, which is a great thing. But at the same time, by giving them control, they feel a lot better about the options and the investments that we're making. And I think that from an investor standpoint, to have that connection with the customer and that line of sight is absolutely critical to the success of our company. And so we look at some of the technologies. EVs will continue to grow dramatically, electric vehicles. There's no question that there's more models of electric vehicles that are being put in place today. We're having to reevaluate the distribution system associated with that. That requires investment to accommodate a changing economic footprint associated with that. And that will continue to occur along with the development of storage technologies and so forth. There's no question that as we look forward to many of the activities from an energy standpoint, CO2 emissions are critical. The reduction of CO2 emissions. And so we want to make absolutely sure the investments that we're making are enabling the optimization, the efficiency, but also the resource transformation to further reduce the carbon footprint of our facilities. So AEP's strategy is really focused in several areas. We obviously want to improve the customer service, but the investments around that, typically, in the past, we've spent $8.2 billion on scrubbers and SCRs for scrubbers to remove SOx, NOx, mercury, those kinds of things from coal-fired power plants. Customers only saw their bills go up. Well, today, that investment cycle has changed dramatically. We were spending 2/3 of our capital investment. At that point in time, it was around $3 billion a year capital investment. 2/3 of it was on environmental equipment for coal-fired generation. Today, completely different. Over 90% of our spend is on wires-related business, and over 75% is on really activities around transmission, distribution that improves the quality of service to our customers and improves the optimization and efficiency of the grid itself. there's no better bang for the buck than to be able to spend at the customer end to get that quality of customer service, but at the same time continue to reduce the emissions across the board. We're doing business in 36 states today. We have 11 main states that we operate in, but the other states are really acquisitions and construction of renewables type projects and storage projects around the country. There's no question as we move forward from an investment standpoint, we'll be looking at not only the investment in the grid itself and the rehabilitation of the grid, the refocusing of the grid on bringing renewables closer to load centers, for example, through transmission. Those are opportunities for us to invest, and there's thousands and thousands of projects that we invest in from that perspective. We also take these individual technologies and we farm them out to our operating companies to focus on the technology deployment. We run pilots of these technologies to see what the benefits are relative to our customers, but also the ability to bring scale to that. One thing is for certain, if you really want to make progress from a climate change perspective or from an ESG perspective, the utilities are uniquely positioned to do that. Because even the technology providers will tell you they need the utility involved to provide the scope and scale for whatever wares they're trying to put in place. And really the adoption of these technologies is critical, and that scope and scale is critical to bring overall costs down. The other part of it is universal access to our customers. You know, only rich people will be able to take advantage of putting renewables in their home and that kind of thing, and storage and other aspects. The utility is what I call the original social network. We're able to take a look at these technologies, adopt the technologies, and provide universal access to everyone. And that's really what the Smart Cities Challenge was all about in Columbus. We won the Smart Cities Challenge, and it was focused on going to neighborhoods, underdeveloped neighborhoods, and providing the kind of opportunities around quality health care, certainly from an electric vehicle standpoint, autonomous vehicle standpoint, to be able to take someone to a job, take someone to health care. Those are critical components of being able to revitalize the communities in the urban areas. And I also maintain electric vehicles can bring the rural areas closer to the urban centers as well. There's a big chasm that exists between not only economic development, but also the views of people in rural areas associated with inability to get access to various opportunities that are available. Well, electric vehicles certainly can bring that to play because the equivalent for electric vehicles is about $1 a gallon, and it's completely maintained, and certainly from a renewable standpoint, if we're using renewables to back it up, that's a great thing from a transportation perspective. The other thing too that we're doing is, because we have the requirements from critical infrastructure, we're making the investments in fiber optic networks to enable the access to all the information that we can gain from the grid itself. Well, there's a byproduct associated with that. Many of our communities that we serve don't even have access to broadband or any of those types of high-speed internet type activities. Well, one of the sideline efforts associated with it, and we have legislation now in Virginia, for example, that allows us to put a pilot in place to run the fiber, bring broadband to the rural areas, and it's another opportunity for us to really put a network in place that brings our country together in many respects. So those are real opportunities for us that really have occurred because we're having to do more monitoring of the system. And as you know, the issues in California are, with wildfire experiences there will obviously drive a lot of the monitoring of the systems and the analytics associated with it. We'll also be adopting those analytics across the nation in many respects as well. So great opportunities to continue to grow. The customer experience is extremely important. The reason why we're involved with 36 states today, and obviously we do a lot of work with the Facebooks, Googles, and Amazons and others on data centers and those types of activities, they really want to see renewables being used for the supply associated with that. So if we really want to be able to accommodate the customers, we need to have the flexibility to be able to do that, and we've done that. As we go forward, though, there's going to be more opportunities across the nation to be able to apply that kind of effort, and eventually you'll see the policy objectives match up to what customers are actually wanting. Yeah, I think you probably hear this across the board. The regulatory efforts lag behind where customers are really wanting to go, and really customers want to move very quickly. We want to be there to move quickly as well, and that's one of the main issues that we're dealing with today, is to make sure that the policy side keeps up with the technological innovation that's occurring. So as we look at the legacy, the new energy future, before, when I came into the business, it was one way. It was, you built the next large central station generation facility, typically coal, nuclear, or natural gas, and you had one-way flow to the customers, energy flows, and the customers got what they got. And there really wasn't any questions about it. That's what was delivered. So it's sort of like healthcare. You really didn't have an idea of how much you were spending or how you were using the product. Today, it's very different. The technology has gotten us to a point where it's bidirectional, not only in terms of energy flow, but also in terms of information. And that information is key for us to be able to aggregate across the system to not only ensure a resilient and reliable grid, but also at the same time be able to accommodate customers' needs in a very unique fashion. So that's going to continue to develop. We already have technologies we're working with to look at multiple sets of distributed energy resources and to be able to aggregate those to provide what we call capacity value or demand value, but at the same time be able to accommodate individual customers in each area. That's a key component that didn't exist when I was electrical engineer in system operations, and we didn't have any of that. So when I look at the transformational areas of the utility today, shale gas obviously had an impact. 10 years ago, we were looking in the Midwest in particular, it was all coal-fired generation. Well, shale gas came along, changed the nature of the thinking around ensuring that every coal unit continued to run. Well, now we're at the threshold of another transformational area, and that's around big data analytics and technology, and of course technology driven at the customer end as a resource as well. So you have both ends of the barbell working at the same time, and it's going to provide us a great opportunity not only to invest, but also to invest in a very wise fashion. So how do we do that? Well, obviously our workforce has to be responsive. We have to have a culture that's open, collaborative, diverse, inclusive, and make sure that each individual that comes to work and has ideas about the business can actually achieve those ideas. And this started with some activities we were doing before in our lean activities, and those activities were centered on how to do process innovation, that type of thing. I'd have 30-year employees on the verge of tears. I'd go to each one of these report outs. They'd be on the verge of tears because they'd never experienced a culture where they could see and participate in changes that occurred. There was always these artificial type of limitations in place that didn't allow employees to flourish. Today, we've driven to a different level. There's no question, as we have our ERGs, we have several ERGs that are in our organization. In terms of the workforce itself, we do regular employee engagement surveys. We also have gone out in the field and done individual discussions with employees on various items. Our board actually is very focused on the cultural aspects of how we're moving forward. And we want to make sure that we're able to not only measure from a metrics perspective, which we do, but also allow our board members to individually go out and visit with employees and get firsthand what they're experiencing in various parts of the organization. We're very transparent with our board. The board obviously is very focused on keenly understanding where we're at from a cultural perspective. Certainly, we're a microcosm of the U.S. Sometimes it disappoints me because we have a lot of employees, have different thoughts about things, and certainly we have to drive the cultural norms that we expect And if you're going to be an employee of our company, then obviously that diversity and inclusion, openness, collaboration is absolutely critical. And for us to be agile in the future, particularly with the transformation that's occurring, there's no question that we have to have a culture that not only exhibits what we would like society to look like and show that, but at the same time, enable employees to be an integral part of where this company's strategy is in the future. There's nothing better to have a line of sight with our investors, through to our board, to our management, to our employees, and to our customers, where they understand what the long-term vision of AEP is about. There's nothing better than that, because many of the things that we do are centered on the objectives that we have, and there's no surprises to anyone along the way, and I think that's absolutely critical. So a highly engaged culture is really important. We have a 114-year history of innovation, really large-scale innovation, transmission, generation, that type of thing. Now we're really moving to a stage where it was always focused on engineering and the hard sciences. It's really moving to, yes, there's still engineering, but also the arts associated with that, the liberal arts, because the thinking behind what we're doing and what the customer interface is will require a very unique type of thinking that is not seen in the hard sciences. So we're having to make that transition from a cultural perspective, and we're making progress doing it. Let's see, I think, there we go. So our sustainability goals and the impact that we have are focused on several areas, particularly the energy environment, and I'll go over some of the goals associated with that. Grid modernization and technology I've talked about. The social responsibility, we have supplier diversity programs where we're focused on reaching out to various areas of the economy to ensure that we're making progress from a supplier standpoint. Our safety and health aspects are focused on, we've always had a great opportunity around safety. We're a very safe company, and we're building on safety into other aspects of the culture because there's a common thinking around that, where we're supportive of one another, where we obviously watch out for each other, and that we're doing the right thing. And that customer focus is exhibited because our employees, if they see that internally going on from a cultural perspective, our customers will recognize by the tenor of our employees that we're doing the right thing. Diversity and inclusion is extremely important because we have to be able to ensure that we're able to attract and maintain talent across the board. We have individual programs, and I talked about the community involvement that we're associated with. We have a program called Credits Counts, and it reaches into middle school students to engage them in STEM technologies, and then shows them the path. We're working with the community colleges to show a path for community college credit while you're in high school. And then if you decide to go to a four-year university, you're ready to do that, but at the same time you have the STEM-related skills to pursue any of these types of activities. And we do that because not only it helps the urban areas of our school systems, we're working with the school systems as well, but also in terms of the workforce of the future. There is no doubt we'll have to have a very diverse workforce in the future. We've got to make sure the feeder pool is working the way it should. But I think companies have a responsibility, and the U.S. Business Roundtable certainly is recognizing this. We took the lead in the Columbus area on the workforce development aspects, working with the universities and with the businesses involved to focus on how we're able to work in alternative mechanisms for education. Everyone's not going to go to a four-year university, but we need welders, we need others, line personnel, and you can make a really good living doing that, but you have to have STEM-related skills, and so we're focusing on that through the community colleges and in other aspects through the unions and so forth. So there's all kinds of opportunities there. We just need to make sure we step forward and focus on that. Economic development is a clear issue for us. Our communities benefit from economic development. We've focused on brownfield areas for manufacturing to locate within our service territory. We've also focused on the economic development areas around ensuring that we're prepared to respond to any ideas that come about from locations of industries to our territory. We've done quite well. Columbus is one of the fastest growing areas in the Midwest. And then our Texas territory is also a fast-growing area, and it's because of those economic development opportunities. We need to move those out, though, to other parts of the country, and we serve West Virginia, Virginia, the former coal fields of those areas, and we're focused with the administration on trying to move forward with many of the aspects there as well. That's an opportunity for us that we'll continue to advance on. So let's talk about carbon emissions. So our report, our last report, is focused on the reductions in carbon emissions that we've seen. And we were, back in 2000, 2005, we were probably the largest emitter in this hemisphere because we're primarily coal-fired generation. We've retired almost 8,000 megawatts of generation and as well about to retire another 12 or 1,300. We continue to drop from a carbon emission standpoint. If you look at our resource set going forward, it's all renewables, it's all renewables, some natural gas to back it up, and energy efficiency and technologies that will move forward. So we've already reduced carbon emissions by 59%. If you remember Waxman-Markey, the legislation, we supported Waxman-Markey, and that legislation, if it had been done, I don't know, it may have been different by now, but we've already exceeded those targets. We've already exceeded the targets of the Clean Power Plan under the President Obama's administration, and we'll certainly continue that regardless of what administration is in place. A lot of times we're asked, from a long-term sustainability thinking, we have to think about our business going forward regardless of which administration is in power or which party is in power. And so we look at our focus today, it is on the customer, it is focused on a clean energy economy, and the directions that we take, the policy-making objectives we take within the states are geared toward moving that in that direction. So we have an 80% target by 2050. So the first question you may have is okay, why isn't it 100%? Why isn't it net zero? Because some companies are coming out and saying that. We look at our focus each and every year, and I go back to the living, breathing document of our corporate accountability report. We're looking at technology, we're looking at policy-making objectives, we're looking at states, processes, the transformation of the fleet, the adoption of these new technologies, and this is what we see today. Now, we're currently reevaluating this based upon the latest information of these technologies, and we'll update that. We like to do it that way because when you look at our report, it gives you a very real sense of where the industry is, where our company is, where our focus is for the long-term future, but also gives you a sense of realism about where we're at and what we can achieve. And so certainly we could say net zero and have a bunch of disclaimers around whether it's policy-making objectives or technology or any of that. We choose to ensure that our document is living and breathing and something that our employees can look at, our investors can look at, and see exactly where the company is today and where it's going in the future. And it'll continue to be updated. So we've transformed our generation fleet entirely, and I point you to the right side of the slide. If you look at the future additions, it's all solar, wind, some natural gas to back it up, and additional contracted renewables. In the context of all this, you see the energy efficiency and demand response continuing to grow. I think that part will continue to grow substantially because of grid modernization. I really characterize energy efficiency and those types of things within that framework. And we're obviously transparent about our progress, and we'll continue to be that way through our corporate accountability report. We've worked with EEI and the industry. The industry is now doing that, so that really gives the industry the opportunity to have a forward view of looking at the future of our industry as well. And it pretty well matches up with what AEP is doing. So I'll leave you with this. We're investing in our customers. We're investing in a clean energy economy. foundation of operational excellence, because there's nothing worse that can get you off track of any of these objectives to have something go wrong from an operational excellence perspective. Focus on safety, innovation, inclusion, diversity and inclusion. Those are obviously opportunities for us to continue to advance. And without that, our workforce will not be at a place that it needs to be agile, to be innovative, and to ensure that we're successful in the future. And then the communities we serve. We're focused on those communities. We're focused on the ability to move the rural areas closer to the urban areas through electrification and through fiber optic technologies, but also to be able to work with our communities to ensure that transitions occur, particularly with the workforce of the future and the way we're mapping that out. So really some great opportunities in our industry. And I'm very excited by the future of AEP, the future of this industry, but also in terms of the future of what our customers are going to be able to see and be able to take control of in the future. So I'll thank you at that point, and I'll take questions. Yeah. There we go.
Questions? Bruce?
Hi, Bruce.
Thank you so much
Where
for
is
this.
it?
Oh, they're really equipped. Thank you so much for the 38 slides. Totally convinces me that my investments in AEP are solid for the next 5 years. So my question has to do with how do you take all this technical and financial capability and move into the future past 5 years? So just 2 data points. I was shocked to find that Shell is beginning to buy companies around the world that are EV controlling, supplying stations. BP's buying battery companies. You know, you have 69 billion in assets already and a market cap of some size where you're a fifth the size of those super majors. Are you interested in expanding the domain of the utility so that you become more an energy company in storage and also in the system of delivering power? Thank you.
Great question. By default, it's actually happening. Certainly with the infrastructure in place for whether it's charging stations, whether it's storage technologies, all those around electric vehicle adoption. For many of you, if you haven't driven an electric vehicle, you should, because it's a very liberating experience to be able to pass by a gas station during the dead of winter when it's cold is a great thing. I'm from the South, so I don't like the cold. So it works out really good. But when you look at the opportunities available, I call it channel growth, sales channel growth, and expansion associated with that. We're seeing opportunities, and I talked about a couple of those, electric vehicles and broadband, for example, where we're not competing against the AT&Ts and others, because we already have the infrastructure there, and it's a great opportunity for us to be able to utilize that infrastructure to the benefit of society. So we continue to look at not only those kinds of investments, but I think you're going to see electric utilities transform themselves into energy companies because of the need to be able to serve our customers. You know, I'll give you an example. In the past, our customers, it was all centered upon us having a distribution line going into a home. Well, what do we really sell to our customers? Do we sell a distribution line going to the home where they still experience outages and those types of things? Or do we sell continuity of service? If we sell continuity of service, that means more than just the distribution. It means storage. It means other applications. It could include transportation. So you see a bill in the future saying this is your energy charge for your home, this is your energy charge for your transportation, and so forth. Those are real opportunities for the growth of our industry. And I think AEP is particularly positioned with that because we have a firm foundation, and the capital allocation process is positioned now to where we are able to look at technologies, adopt those technologies, and ensure that we're improving the quality of service to our customers and expand the channels associated with growth.
Next question. Here in front.
I'm Doug McGraw, independent investor. A speaker earlier celebrated the fact that as more sustainable impact investors engaged with companies, you and your counterparts would be able to take a longer term view. However, in sympathy with some of your shorter term investors, income funds, people who need that dividend now, how do you balance their needs with the requirements, the desires of those who want that 60% reduction in CO2 to fall even faster? And maybe some hard, if you have these numbers, has your required return on equity fallen to achieve those goals? Has your CapEx commitment, does that change, again, to balance the short-term needs of those dividend investors and to cover that dividend with the needs and desires of the longer-term investors?
Yeah, so, and that is a balancing act, there's no question about it. As we go through it though, even as we're moving toward a clean energy economy, the investments that are being made are no regrets investments. And if we're able to maximize the value of those investments going forward with multiple thousands, I mean, we have thousands of projects just in transmission alone. We're the largest transmission provider in the country. And to enable a clean energy economy going forward, we're able to invest. We're able to recover those investments because the regulators recognize that it produces value to our customers, and it matches up with the quarterly goals as well as the annual and on into the future. And just in my view, our board is not, I'd say this, we look at 5 years obviously, but we're in a very unique circumstance where we're able to think 10 years and 15 years out. We already know what's happening for the next 5 years. We're going to continue to invest in transmission. We're going to continue to invest in the grid itself, distribution modernization, all those types of activities. So that satisfies the short-term investors. And then at the same time, we have to be very knowledgeable about how much are we going to segregate out to review new technologies, for example, because that's going to impact ROE and for the corporation, that kind of thing. But we're constantly doing that so that we can have eyes and ears into the future. If we don't do that, we can wind up being irrelevant to our customers, and it's not a good long-term investment either. So, so there is a balance that occurs there, and between quarters to quarters, we have O&M expenses, for example. We're trying to bend the O&M curve with automation, digitization, and we'll continue to do that to mitigate the impact on a quarterly basis.
We have an online question here. Does the future in the electric utility industry include further consolidation across geographic territories?
I think ultimately it will, and there continues to be consolidation within the industry for various reasons. And I think you have to look at the individual companies and see why they're making these acquisitions. And it may be because they're looking for growth. It may be because they're looking for convergence in some ways from a technology perspective. AEP has a very high threshold for acquisitions because we do have the largest transmission system in the country. We have plenty to spend on. Our capital budget today, when I became CEO, was around $3 billion a year. Today it's about $7 billion a year. And most of that is focused on rehabilitation and enhancements of the transmission and distribution infrastructure. So I have the opportunity to continue to spend and recover investments, and I don't have to pay a premium for it. So it would have to be truly strategic for AEP to make a decision for a large transaction, particularly in light of, you know, if you have about $1.5 billion of depreciation, you're spending $7 billion a year. We're buying a mid-sized company every year. So it's a great opportunity, but I think it will continue to occur. There's no question about it.
We have time for one more question, audience. Oh, it's over here.
Hi, Joyce Coffey with Climate Resilience Consulting. Thank you so much for your really extraordinary leadership. I do have a question about climate change, but I don't want you to be thinking I'm talking about mitigating greenhouse gas emissions because you described that well in your presentation. However, I didn't hear you talk about climate change, nor did the prior speaker, nor did our introducer.
Yep.
And I know this is a conference about sustainability, but sustainability is about looking back and trying
Right.
to sustain what we have. So my question to you is, how are you addressing the physical impacts of climate change that you both see today, and also that the scenarios of climate risk predict you will see more and more, including the increase in demand for electric power due to extreme heat, but also major storm events, be they fire or coastal or riverine flooding?
So there's many aspects to that question. First of all, a lot is being spent on resiliency of the grid itself. The capital being deployed, and actually I can point to the industry effort around Hurricane Irma in Florida. We know Florida Power and Light spent billions on enhancing their facilities. We're doing the same thing in our Texas territory, for example, that has hurricanes come through there. And you're thinking about the system differently, not only in terms of those original resiliency investments, but also the recovery aspects. There's much more being done around recovery, not only in terms of combination of utilities getting together, we've done that for decades, but also we collapsed organizations to ensure that we're able to respond much more quickly in a much more focused fashion. And also we're working with the federal government through our Electric Security Coordinating Council that really focuses on what the, for example, use of drone technologies in terms of outage management. Those are kinds of things that will improve the recovery efforts, but the main point is around resiliency and investment in the grid in a different way, whether it's concrete structures, whether it's sort of a simple thing that you don't really even think about. Most of the expense of recovering from a storm coming through is the replacement of poles. Well, okay, you can make the poles pretty resilient, but make the cross arms like they fall apart very quickly, because you can recover from that very quickly. You don't normally think of the system that way. So there's all kinds of things being considered from that perspective and being spent, but at the same time, monitoring itself is changing, and that's why the fiber optic networks are going in today to ensure that we're able to monitor the system in a much better fashion and be able to have a learning system that can respond very quickly as well. So those are key areas outside of the carbon emissions and those types of things that the utilities are taking on. Yeah.
Thank you. With that, thank you for
Okay.
Q&A, and thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Mark. Yep.